An ordinary single father got stuck in an elevator with a wealthy CEO, but what he did inside changed the $3 billion smart building forever. Subscribe if you like stories like this, and write in the comments which city you're from. I'm curious to know where you're watching from. Dawn crawled up the glass skin of Carrington Tower like a pale promise over the city, catching on each steel ribbon mirrored panel, washing the 100-story skeleton in quiet gold. Chicago woke around it. Sirens far below like the cry of birds that had learned how to echo in concrete canyons, the L rattling somewhere unseen, a rhythm that belonged to a city that had learned to survive on hard edges and colder mornings. Inside the tower, the world was different. Temperature controlled, lights adjusted to circadian rhythms of whoever passed. Glass doors that parted without a sound at the flick of a wrist or the curve of a face recognized by the building's unseen eyes. No place for chaos here, no room for unpredictability or hesitation. Perfection was the expectation, and every whir of the system was a note in a song only the building's artificial intelligence could hear. Evelyn Clark stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, high enough that the city below looked small enough to command with a breath. Her reflection in the glass was clean lines, pressed gray suit, neat dark hair cut sharp around a face that hadn't smiled in photographs in over a decade. In one hand, she held a tablet scrolling reports in silent blue light. With the other, she sipped black coffee so bitter it scalded her tongue, reminding her she was awake, alive, and necessary. Today was audit day, and investors were coming, their thin smiles and thicker checkbooks ready to judge the tower she had spent the last 10 years building, the systems she had bent to her will, the numbers she had bled for. Perfection was the price of survival in her world, and Evelyn had learned how to pay it daily, piece by piece, never letting the cost show on her face. Down below, in a maintenance bay that smelled faintly of oil and the soft rust of pipes that had outlived a dozen budgets, Damian Harper adjusted the strap on his worn tool belt. His dark hands moved with the easy care of a man who knew exactly how much torque a bolt could take before it sheared, how to hear the difference between the whisper of a working pipe and the moan of one about to fail. His boots were scuffed but clean, laces tied tight, everything in place because if you weren't ready, you were already behind. He glanced at the time on his old watch, the one with the cracked face that had belonged to his father, and turned toward the corner where Layla sat on a metal stool with her legs dangling, too small to reach the floor. Her hair was twisted into small braids that brushed her cheeks when she tilted her head to listen, which she did often, as if the world was always telling her secrets that adults forgot how to hear. "Ready, Bug?" he asked softly. Layla nodded, clutching a small notebook to her chest. It was filled with her drawings, lines and swirls and boxes, with eyes that she said were elevators that sang at night. Sometimes she covered her ears in the apartment when the building's pipes rattled and whispered, telling her things she said made her sad, made her scared. "Do you hear it, Daddy?" she asked, her voice a soft question, eyes wide and serious. "Hear what, baby?" "The building," she whispered. "It's crying again." Damian knelt, resting a gentle hand on her knee. "I know. We're going to help it, remember?" She nodded, though her eyes were far away, fixed on something only she could hear. After dropping Layla off at the small aftercare room run by Miss Tessa in the basement, where she would color and hum softly while he worked, Damian checked his assignments for the day. A vibration report from the service elevators on the east shaft flagged twice, but dismissed by the main system as non-priority variants. He frowned. Those were the reports he trusted most, the ones the system ignored, but the pipes and cables didn't. They had a way of turning into emergencies if you didn't listen closely enough. Above him, Evelyn was already moving through her checklist, speaking in crisp commands to assistants who scurried to match her pace, adjusting the lighting in the lobby, confirming the arrival times of black cars that would deliver people who thought in margins and losses. She moved like a shadow with sharp edges, her heels silent on polished floors, never pausing, never letting the doubt inside her catch up. For her, the tower was a promise, a statement, proof that she was untouchable, that she could take the chaos of the world and lock it inside glass and steel and algorithms that obeyed without question. She could not afford for it to fail. Not today, not ever. In the basement, Layla pulled a crayon from the cup beside her and began to draw. A tall rectangle, wires, like veins, a heart in the middle, pulsing out lines that made her hand shake a little. She colored the heart red, then blue, then red again, unsure which it should be, because she said it changed when the building was sad, and she wanted to get it right. She hummed softly to herself, a small, careful melody that matched the rhythm she felt in the floor beneath her feet. Damien moved through the lower levels, listening, not with the system sensors, but with his feet, with the vibration in his bones, with the way the air changed when something was wrong. He stopped beside the east elevator shaft, placing a hand on the cool metal of the door, closing his eyes. There it was, a thrum, irregular, a stutter like a heartbeat skipping, and he exhaled, recognizing the sound for what it was, a warning. He pulled his tools out, working quietly, opening a small panel and checking the wiring. A loose connection, maybe, or a misaligned bracket. He adjusted, tightened, but the vibration continued. His jaw tightened. It wasn't mechanical, or not only mechanical, it was something deeper, something in the system's breath, in the rhythm Layla said she heard at night. On the 92nd floor, Evelyn's phone buzzed with reminders. Conference call in 20 minutes. Investors arriving in 40. Audit review in an hour. She adjusted the cuffs of her jacket, stepped into the VIP elevator, and gave the system a sharp, clear command. 92nd floor, executive conference level. The doors slid shut with a whisper, the lights inside shifting to a soft gold that was meant to calm the mind, to instill confidence in the people who rode this lift to floors where decisions were made that others would never know about. Below, Damien checked his readings again, watching a small, old device flicker with red as the vibration pulsed once, twice, a pause, then again. He glanced at the service panel. It wasn't a coincidence. He needed to check the upper connection, and there wasn't time to wait for permission. He moved toward the same elevator shaft, tapping his ID against the panel, requesting access. The system hesitated, then beeped green, granting entry. The doors opened, and for a brief second, he locked eyes with the woman standing inside. Their worlds collided in that breath, her crisp, cold blue eyes widening slightly, his dark, calm gaze meeting hers with the steadiness of a man who did not have time to be afraid. Then the doors closed with a hiss, and everything stopped. There was a jolt, soft but wrong, the kind of wrong that Damien felt in his teeth, in the hair on his arms rising as the lights flickered once, then again, and then died, leaving only the red glow of the emergency strip along the floor. Silence swallowed them. The hum of the tower vanished, replaced by a stillness so deep it pressed into their ears, into their chests, into the small spaces where fear lived. Even in the most controlled of people, Evelyn's breath caught just once before she clicked into the cold efficiency that had made her who she was. She pressed the emergency call button. Nothing. Pressed again, harder. Still nothing. She turned, her eyes flashing in the dim red light, landing on the man standing quietly beside the panel, his hand still resting where the door had closed. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice sharp, brittle around the edges. Damien didn't flinch. He looked at her, then at the walls, then closed his eyes for the briefest moment, as if listening. "It's not me," he said, his voice calm, steady as the dark. "It's the building." Her jaw tightened, her lips parting to unleash something, but she stopped, the words catching on the truth in his tone, the certainty that came from someone who had learned to hear what others could not. The building shivered around them, a soft groan that was not mechanical, not entirely. It was deeper, like something alive, something that had been ignored for too long and was finally trying to speak, to be heard in the only way it knew how. Damien opened his eyes, meeting hers again, and this time she saw it, the quiet in him, the unshakable calm that came from a man who had stood in the dark before and survived it. "Don't panic," he said quietly. "I don't panic," she snapped too quickly, and around them the tower held its breath, waiting to see if that was true. The silence in the elevator was the kind that wasn't empty but full, pressing in from every angle, breathing down the back of your neck. The red glow from the emergency strip at the base of the walls threw long, uncertain shadows across the small space, turning the brushed steel panels into something that looked like skin, pale and waiting. Evelyn pressed the emergency button again, harder this time, as if force could change the circuitry, her jaw tight, her movements precise. She waited, counting the seconds in her head, counting the way she always did when negotiating, when waiting for a yes that she was certain would come, because it always did. Nothing. She pressed it again. Nothing. Her hand dropped just for a moment, and in that moment her eyes flickered, fear there and gone like a heartbeat, replaced by anger because anger was safer, more useful. She turned to the man leaning quietly against the panel, who was watching the ceiling like it was speaking to him. "What did you break?" she demanded, her voice crisp, the tone that made executives flinch and boardrooms go silent. Damien didn't answer immediately. His head was tilted slightly, eyes half closed, listening in a way that made her want to shake him. She opened her mouth to demand again, but he spoke first. "It's not broken," he said. "It's stuck." Evelyn's nostrils flared. "That's the same thing." He finally looked at her, his eyes dark and calm, the way water looks right before a storm. "Not if you know how to listen." She took a breath, sharp and quick, her control slipping just enough for her to notice it. "I don't have time for riddles." "Then we're going to be here a while," he replied quietly, turning his gaze back to the ceiling. The elevator groaned, a low, guttural sound that made the floor vibrate under their feet. Evelyn's hand shot out to the railing, her knuckles white. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, and she closed her eyes for a moment, forcing the panic down, pushing it back where it belonged, where no one could see. "I don't panic," she whispered to herself. Damien heard it, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he moved, kneeling down and pressing his palm against the floor, closing his eyes, breathing in through his nose as if he could taste the tension in the air. "What are you doing?" Evelyn asked, her voice tight. "Listening," he said. "To what?" she snapped. "To the building." She stared at him, incredulous. "It's a building, not a person." He opened his eyes, looking up at her with a softness that startled her more than anger would have. "You'd be surprised." She looked away, folding her arms, pacing the small space, the sound of her heels clicking against the steel floor sharp, a desperate sound. The elevator hummed again, Another groan, and she pressed herself against the wall, breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling too fast. Damien watched her quietly before he spoke again. "Are you claustrophobic?" he asked, his voice low, careful. Her eyes snapped to his, fury there, but behind it something else, something fragile. "I don't have fears," she hissed. "Everyone has something," he replied gently. "I can't afford to," she said, her voice cracking. The silence that followed was different, heavy in a way that felt like confession. Evelyn sank down to the floor, her back against the cold wall, pulling her knees up, her expensive suit creasing, but she didn't care. She pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes, trying to block out the panic, the pressure, the memories. She remembered being a little girl, trapped in a closet during a storm, the wind howling outside, the darkness so complete she could taste it. Her father had told her to stay quiet, to stay still, to not make a sound because fear was weakness, and weakness was death. She had learned how to be quiet, how to be still, how to lock fear away in a box deep inside. But here, in the small, pulsing darkness, the box was cracking. Damien's voice pulled her back. "You're breathing too fast," he said softly. "Match my breath." She looked at him, her eyes wet, and hated him for seeing her like this. But she listened. He inhaled slowly, exhaled even slower, and she tried, matching the rhythm, letting the air fill her lungs, letting it go, again and again, until the world stopped tilting. When her breathing slowed, she opened her eyes and found him watching her with the calm of a man who had done this before, who had stood in dark places and learned to wait for the light. "Better?" he asked. She nodded once, curtly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Don't get used to it." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Wasn't planning on it." They sat in silence for a while, the building around them groaning softly, the elevator swaying almost imperceptibly. Evelyn looked at him, really looked, noticing the calluses on his hands, the way his uniform was clean but worn, the small rip near the knee stitched carefully. "You have kids?" she asked suddenly. His eyes softened, the way glass softens under heat. "Yeah, a daughter, Layla." "How old?" "7. Evelyn swallowed. "And her mother?" "Gone," he said simply, and the word carried weight, like it had been held for a long time. She nodded, looking down at her hands. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he said. "We keep going." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. After a moment, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, carefully smoothed it, and held it out to her. She hesitated, then took it. It was a child's drawing. Crayon lines in red and blue, a tall rectangle with wires like veins, and a heart in the middle. "What is it?" she asked softly. "It's this elevator," he said. "Layla says it's crying." Evelyn looked at the drawing, tracing the lines with her finger, feeling the roughness of the crayon, the care in each stroke. "Why would she think that?" she whispered. "Because she hears things we don't," he said. "Frequencies, vibrations. She says the building sings when it's happy, and cries when it's not." Evelyn's eyes stung again, and she hated it, hated the softness in her chest that the drawing brought, the ache that she had spent years burying. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because," he said, "maybe it's trying to tell us something, and maybe you're the only one it will listen to." She looked at him, really looked, and saw not just a technician but a father, a man who listened when the world was quiet, who heard what others ignored. The elevator shuddered, a deep, resonant sound that echoed in the small space, and Evelyn felt it in her bones. "What is it saying now?" she asked. Damien tilted his head, closing his eyes again, listening. "It's saying it's stuck," he said. "It's saying it needs help." Evelyn looked at the drawing again, at the small, careful heart in the center of the lines. "How do we help it?" she whispered. Damien opened his eyes, meeting hers, steady and calm. "We listen," he said. And in the darkness, in the soft red glow, surrounded by the quiet hum of a tower that had forgotten how to feel, Evelyn Clark, who had built her world on silence, finally did. The air inside the elevator felt warmer now, or maybe it was the quiet that made it feel that way. The slow, shared breathing of two people who had run out of places to hide from themselves. Evelyn sat with the drawing in her lap, tracing the lines again and again, her thumb smudging the red crayon heart until it looked like it was beating. Damien moved carefully around the small space, pulling a small analog tester from his tool bag, an old piece of equipment with scratches and worn edges, the kind of tool that had outlived a dozen upgrades because it never stopped working. "What is that?" she asked, her voice softer than before. "It listens," he said simply, clipping a wire to the panel near the control board. "To what?" she asked again, but this time it wasn't a challenge. It was curiosity, almost childlike, edged with a hunger she didn't know how to name. "To everything," Damien replied, his eyes watching the small needle on the tester flicker as the building hummed around them. Vibrations, currents, the small things the system ignores. The needle jumped, twitched, fell still, then jumped again, a steady, irregular rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. Evelyn leaned forward, unable to look away. "What does it mean?" she whispered. "It means it's alive," Damien said. "Not alive like us, but alive enough to know when something's wrong." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his, seeing the conviction there, the certainty of a man who had spent his life listening to things others could not hear. She realized she envied him that certainty, that quiet in his eyes. "How did you learn to do this?" she asked. Damien paused, the question settling in the space between them. "Layla," he said, "she hears things, vibrations, frequencies. She'd cry at night because the pipes were too loud, because the walls were shaking in a way only she could feel. So I learned to hear it too." Evelyn swallowed, pressing the drawing against her chest. "And what do you hear now?" Damien closed his eyes, pressing his hand against the cold steel of the elevator wall, letting the vibrations run through his bones. "It's scared," he said quietly. "It's stuck. It doesn't know how to fix itself." Evelyn laughed, a short, bitter sound. "It's a building, Damien." He opened his eyes, looking at her. "And you built it to be perfect. But nothing perfect ever learns how to heal." The words hit her harder than she expected, knocking the breath from her lungs. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Instead, she looked away, blinking back tears. "How do we help it?" she asked again, her voice breaking. Damien moved to the panel, pulling off the cover to reveal a mess of wires and circuits. He pulled out a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the red glow like a promise. "We talk to it," he said. "With what?" she asked. He held up the tester, then pulled a small wire from his bag, connecting it to the circuits, the other end to the tester. The needle jumped, steady now, rhythmic. "Your daughter's frequency," Evelyn whispered, realization dawning. Damien nodded. "She calls it the building's song. It's more like a heartbeat, but it's hers." He handed her the wire, guiding her hand to hold it steady against a small metal contact. "Why me?" she asked, her fingers trembling. Because it's your building, Damien said, looking at her with calm certainty, and it needs to know you're listening. Evelyn held the wire, feeling the faint vibrations against her skin like a whisper, like the smallest part of a promise. "What now?" she asked. "Now," Damien said, "you breathe." Together, they inhaled, exhaled, matching the rhythm of the vibrations, the soft hum filling the elevator like a lullaby, like something ancient and real. The elevator shuddered once, violently, making them both grab the railing. Then it stilled. The lights flickered, dimmed, then glowed brighter, the red fading into soft white. The tester beeped once, twice, then settled into a steady green glow. "It's listening," Damien said softly. The elevator began to move, slowly at first, then with more certainty, the hum of the machinery smoothing out, as if the building had exhaled, as if it had remembered how to breathe. The doors opened with a quiet chime, revealing a dimly lit technical floor, wires running along the walls, pipes humming softly, warm air brushing against their faces like a sigh. Evelyn stepped out first, turning back to look at Damien, who stood with the tester still in his hand, the light casting soft shadows across his face. "You fixed it," she said, her voice filled with awe. Damien shook his head. "We fixed it." She looked down at the drawing still clutched in her hand. The crayon lines blurred where her tears had fallen, the heart in the middle bright and steady. "Why did you really come into the elevator today?" she asked suddenly. Damien looked at her, surprised, then shrugged. "To fix what was broken." She held his gaze, her eyes searching his, then nodded slowly. "I think you fixed more than you know," she whispered. They stepped out together, the elevator doors closing softly behind them, the hum of the building following them as they walked down the corridor, side by side, not as strangers anymore, but as two people who had learned to listen. As they reached the end of the hallway, Evelyn paused, turning to him. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "Why?" Damien asked. "Because," she said, lifting the drawing, "we have more to fix." Damien smiled, the kind of smile that came from deep inside, the kind that reached the eyes. "I'll bring Layla," he said. Evelyn nodded, her eyes bright. "I'd like that." And as they left the floor, the building hummed quietly around them, the lights flickering once, twice, like a heartbeat, like the smallest whisper of hope, reminding them that even the tallest towers could learn how to listen, if only someone would teach them how. Carrington Tower had never felt quiet before. It was a building that thrummed with purpose, with the ceaseless breath of recycled air, the whisper of elevators rising and falling, the muted chatter of voices that never quite reached the top floors. But now, as Evelyn Clark walked through the marble lobby toward the control center, there was a hush that wasn't emptiness, but listening. She held the crumpled drawing in her hand, Layla's drawing, its lines worn soft where her thumb had traced them again and again through a sleepless night. She had gone back to her penthouse, sat in the darkness, and for the first time in years let herself feel the weight of the silence she had built around herself. She saw her reflection in the black glass of her office window, the city lights behind her like a promise she had never quite believed in. For a long time she stood there, the drawing pressed against her chest, her eyes closed, breathing in the quiet, letting it fill her until it hurt. When morning came, she didn't put on her usual suit. She pulled on a simple navy blouse, black slacks, and low shoes. She left her hair down, the dark strands brushing against her jaw as she moved. She didn't need armor today. In the control room, the board was already assembled. Men in dark suits with silver watches, women with sharp eyes and sharper tongues, all of them waiting watching her as she entered. Harper Sloan, her operations director, stood with his arms folded, his expression set in stone. "You're late," he said. Evelyn ignored him, walking to the console and placing the drawing gently on the table. "What is this?" Harper demanded, his voice slicing through the room. She looked up, meeting his eyes. "A reminder." "A reminder of what?" he snapped. "That we built this place to serve people, not numbers." Harper scoffed, looking around the room for support. "You want to talk about feelings, Evelyn? Now? On the day investors are coming to review the quarterly report?" She held his gaze, unflinching. "Yes." Silence fell. Somewhere in the building, a door hissed softly, the system adjusting the airflow, listening. Damien stood near the back, his work uniform clean, Layla standing beside him, her small hand gripping his finger, her eyes wide as she looked around the room filled with people who never noticed her before. Evelyn turned to Layla and smiled, a real smile, one that made the child's eyes light up. "Would you like to show them?" she asked softly. Layla blinked, then nodded, stepping forward, clutching her small notebook to her chest. She opened it carefully, showing page after page of colored lines and shapes, her voice barely a whisper as she spoke. "This is what the building sounds like when it's sad," she said, pointing to a page filled with sharp, jagged lines. "And this is what it sounds like when it's happy," she said, turning to a page with soft, curved lines and a bright red heart in the center. The room was silent. "She can hear things we can't," Damien said, his voice quiet but steady. "The system you built is smart, but it doesn't listen. It doesn't hear when someone needs help, when something is wrong. It only hears commands." Harper stepped forward, his face red. "This is absurd. We are running a building, not a daycare for feelings." Evelyn turned to him, her eyes calm, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "And how many times has that system ignored warnings because it didn't fit the priority list? How many times has it failed to protect the people inside because it didn't recognize fear or pain or distress?" Harper opened his mouth, but no words came. "I spent years building this tower to be perfect," Evelyn continued, her voice softer now, "to be efficient, to be strong. But I forgot that strength isn't silence. It's listening." She turned to the board, looking each member in the eye. "We are reinstating the human sensory integration protocols immediately. We will recalibrate the system to recognize human variables, not ignore them." Harper shook his head. "You're risking everything." Evelyn stepped closer, her chin lifting. "No, I'm saving everything." The silence that followed was not empty. It was a waiting silence, the kind that came before change. Harper looked around the room, realizing he had lost. He lowered his head, stepping back. Evelyn turned to Damien, who nodded once, moving to the console, Layla beside him. He placed a small device on the table, connecting it to the system. Layla placed her hand on the screen, her small fingers trembling. "Hello?" she whispered. The lights in the room flickered, then steadied, the screens displaying lines of code that shifted, adapting, listening. In the building, the systems hummed softly, the vibrations changing, smoothing, as if the structure itself was taking a breath for the first time. The maintenance wing doors, long stuck, slid closed gently, the lights adjusting to the warmth of the morning sun. In the lobby, the security gates, which always beeped harshly, now chimed softly as people passed through, a greeting instead of a warning. In the conference room, Evelyn looked at Layla, her eyes filled with tears she didn't hide. "Thank you," she whispered. Layla smiled, a small, shy smile, and turned to look at her father. "We fixed it," she said. Damien knelt, pulling her into a hug, pressing his forehead to hers. "No, Bug," he said softly. "You fixed it." The board members quietly filed out, conversations hushed, eyes thoughtful. Harper paused at the door, looking back, his expression unreadable. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. Evelyn met his gaze, unafraid. "No, I won't." As the room emptied, Evelyn stood beside Damien and Layla, the screens around them pulsing softly with new life. "What now?" Damien asked. Evelyn looked around, then down at Layla. "Now we teach it how to keep listening." They walked out of the room together, the building humming softly, like a heart that had learned how to beat, like a home that had learned how to breathe. In the lobby, people paused, noticing for the first time how warm the light felt, how the air smelled clean, how the floor no longer vibrated with cold indifference but pulsed with something almost like comfort. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that a building in its heart had learned something new that day. And in a small room on the service floor, Layla sat cross-legged, drawing a new picture, one of a building with open windows, with people inside smiling, with a heart that beat softly in the center. She titled it, in careful block letters, Home. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you feel something, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this every week. Check out our other videos to find more stories that remind us what really matters. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.